Emily Thompson never imagined her summer would turn into a fight for her uncle's life. At just 8 years old, she uncovered a dark secret about her Aunt Lisa that would shatter everything she thought she knew about family. As Lisa's sinister plan to poison her husband, Peter, unfolded, Emily became the only one who could stop her wicked aunt, and she did so just in time to save her uncle from death's grip. What started as a quiet suburban life soon spiraled into a terrifying battle for survival, with a little girl at the center of it all. The Thompson family seemed like a picture-perfect unit, the kind of family everyone admired in the small suburban town of Maple Ridge. James, a well-established businessman, had worked hard to provide a comfortable life for his family. His wife, Lisa, was the charming and seemingly devoted homemaker, always greeting their neighbors with a warm smile and a welcoming attitude. Their daughter, Emily, was an intelligent and curious 8-year-old who loved reading books, playing outside, and spending time with her family. Their house, nestled on a quiet street lined with oak trees and white picket fences, stood as a symbol of happiness and success. But beneath the surface, cracks began to form in the idyllic facade. It started when James's younger brother, Peter, moved in with the family after a bitter divorce left him with nowhere else to go. Peter had always been a free spirit, a bit of a wanderer, but he had never been a burden. His presence was welcomed, especially by Emily, who adored her uncle. He was fun, full of life, and always made her feel special with the little adventures they would go on, whether it was a trip to the park or playing imaginative games in the backyard. Peter's laughter was a bright contrast to the otherwise quiet household, and Emily loved the attention and affection he gave her. But over time, something began to shift. Peter started withdrawing. He wasn't the same jovial figure he once was. The light in his eyes began to fade, and his once cheerful demeanor became overshadowed by an air of exhaustion and distress. Emily, being an intuitive little girl, noticed the subtle changes. He no longer seemed excited to spend time with her, and when they did interact, he often appeared distracted, almost as if he was carrying an invisible weight. His usual enthusiasm was replaced with a quiet sadness that Emily couldn't understand, but felt deeply. The tension in the house seemed to grow with each passing day. The once loving couple, James and Lisa, began to drift apart. Emily, too young to fully grasp the gravity of their marital issues, sensed that something was wrong between her parents. They no longer laughed together at dinner or shared long conversations. Instead, their interactions were strained, filled with silence or terse exchanges that Emily found hard to ignore. The house, once filled with laughter and light, seemed to grow quieter and colder. As days turned into weeks, the unsettling atmosphere only deepened. Emily began hearing whispers in the middle of the night, snippets of arguments between Peter and Lisa that echoed through the walls. The words weren't clear, but the tone was unmistakable. There was a sharpness in Lisa's voice that Emily hadn't heard before. The house that had once felt like a safe haven now seemed fraught with invisible dangers. Though Emily couldn't make sense of it, she understood one thing: things were no longer as they had been. Her uncle's laughter had faded, her aunt's warmth had turned cold, and her family's once perfect world seemed to be unraveling right before her eyes. She didn't know what was happening, but she could feel it. The change, the unease, the impending doom that hung over their home like a dark cloud. It was only a matter of time before something terrible would happen, and Emily had no idea how to stop it. As weeks passed, the subtle but unsettling changes in the Thompson household became more apparent to Emily. Her uncle Peter seemed to be getting weaker, both physically and emotionally. His once cheerful spirit had all but disappeared, replaced by a quiet sadness that lingered in his eyes. Emily noticed that he struggled to get out of bed in the mornings, his movements slow and deliberate as if every step took more effort than the last. His appetite had decreased, and he often complained of stomach pains. But Lisa dismissed his discomfort with casual indifference. "It's just stress," she would say, brushing off his complaints as if they were nothing more than an inconvenience. But Emily knew better. She had always been attuned to her uncle's moods, and this wasn't normal. It wasn't just stress. There was something more sinister at play. She began to notice the small signs that something wasn't right. The way Peter seemed to lose weight rapidly, his skin becoming pale and sallow, his once sharp mind now clouded and confused. And then there was the way Lisa watched him with an intensity that made Emily's skin crawl. It was as if she was waiting for something, or perhaps hoping for something. Emily wasn't sure what it was, but she felt it. A dark presence in the house that wasn't there before. She started paying closer attention to her aunt, watching her every move when she thought no one was looking. Lisa's behavior was becoming increasingly strange. She had stopped being the warm and nurturing figure that she once was. Instead, she was cold, distant, and often absent, disappearing for hours at a time. When she was home, she rarely interacted with Peter or Emily, preferring to retreat into her own world, her eyes constantly darting with a mixture of guilt and anger. One evening, Emily overheard her aunt talking on the phone in the kitchen. She had been playing in the living room when she heard Lisa's voice, low and urgent, but the words were clear enough to send a chill down her spine. Emily crept closer to the kitchen door, listening intently. "He's too weak now," Lisa's voice said almost in a whisper. "He won't last much longer. The money will be mine, and then everything will be mine. He's a burden I can't carry anymore." Emily's heart raced as she struggled to make sense of what she had just heard. Lisa was talking about Peter, about killing him. Emily didn't understand the full meaning of what she had overheard, but the words rang in her mind, filling her with dread. Lisa was poisoning her uncle. Slowly, methodically. The very woman who had been a part of her life, the woman who had once been her mother's closest friend, was trying to kill her uncle. Fear gripped Emily as she realized the gravity of the situation. She had to do something, but what? She was just a little girl. No one would believe her if she told them. No one would take her seriously. But as the truth began to sink in, Emily knew she couldn't let her uncle die without trying to stop it. The next few days were a blur of panic and confusion. Emily kept a close eye on her aunt, trying to figure out what to do. But Lisa seemed to grow more elusive by the day. The strange pills that Peter had been taking appeared more frequently in the medicine cabinet. Emily had seen Lisa slip them into Peter's food, but she couldn't figure out exactly what they were. They weren't regular painkillers. There was something off about them. Something that made Emily's instincts scream that they were dangerous. Peter's condition worsened as time went on. His stomach pains became more intense, and his once strong body grew frail. His mood turned darker, and he seemed to be slipping away, both physically and mentally. Emily's heart ached for her uncle, but she knew she had to act quickly. Lisa was so focused on her plan that she hadn't noticed Emily's growing awareness. Desperation set in. Emily realized that the only way to save her uncle was to find someone who could help, someone who would believe her. But she was alone in her fight, and the truth was too horrifying for anyone to comprehend. The dark secret of Lisa's betrayal had taken root, and Emily was the only one who could expose it before it was too late. Emily couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had taken root in her chest. Every passing day seemed to make her uncle weaker, and Lisa's increasingly erratic behavior confirmed her worst fears. She had overheard too many disturbing conversations, seen too many signs that her aunt's intentions were darker than she could have ever imagined. The pills, the food, the coldness in Lisa's eyes whenever she glanced at Peter. It all pointed to one thing. Lisa was poisoning her uncle, and unless Emily did something soon, Peter might not survive. Despite her fear, Emily knew she couldn't stay silent. She had to act, But the more she thought about it, the more daunting the task seemed. She was just an 8-year-old girl. Who would believe her? The authorities would think she was making things up, a child's wild imagination at play. But Emily had seen too much to ignore it any longer. Her uncle's life was in danger, and she couldn't let Lisa get away with what she was doing. The more she observed her aunt, the more she realized that Lisa was not only poisoning Peter slowly, but she had also been manipulating him emotionally, making him feel weak and helpless. Peter, once a vibrant man, now looked gaunt and fragile, unable to rise from his bed without help. He hardly ate, and when he did, it seemed to have no effect on his energy. Emily would watch as Lisa prepared his meals, always with an eerie calmness, never showing any concern for her husband's deteriorating state. One evening, Emily was sitting in the living room trying to act as normal as possible when she saw Lisa leave the house. The door closed softly behind her, and Emily felt a spark of hope. It was rare that Lisa left the house for any length of time. Emily knew this was her chance to investigate. She had to find evidence, something concrete that would prove Lisa's guilt. Silently, she tiptoed into the kitchen and opened the cupboard where Lisa kept the medicine. Her heart raced as she searched through the shelves, her small hands trembling. The bottle of pills was there, exactly where she had seen it before. She quickly grabbed it and looked at the label, the same one she had seen a few days ago. The pills didn't match the ones Peter had been prescribed. These were different, and Emily knew they weren't meant to help him. They were meant to hurt him. With the bottle in hand, Emily had only one option left. She needed to find someone who could help, someone who would listen to her and take her seriously. But the nearest neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, was elderly and didn't have a strong relationship with the Thompsons. Emily wasn't sure if she would believe a little girl's story about her aunt trying to kill her uncle. It had to be someone else, someone she could trust completely. Then it came to her. Mrs. Taylor, a kind-hearted woman who lived a few houses down. She had always been a friend of the family, always stopping by with cookies or flowers. Mrs. Taylor was someone who had seen the Thompsons as the happy family they used to be. Emily thought that if anyone would believe her, it would be Mrs. Taylor. With the bottle of pills hidden carefully in her pocket, Emily ran to Mrs. Taylor's house. She was out of breath by the time she reached the doorstep, and her heart pounded in her chest. When Mrs. Taylor opened the door, she was surprised to see Emily standing there, her face pale and filled with anxiety. "Emily, sweetheart, what's wrong?" Mrs. Taylor asked, bending down to her level. "I need help," Emily said in a hushed voice, her words tumbling out in a rush. "It's about Aunt Lisa. She's hurting Uncle Peter. She's poisoning him. I've seen it. She's trying to kill him." Mrs. Taylor's face froze in disbelief. She looked down at Emily, unsure of what to say, but the desperation in the little girl's eyes convinced her that this wasn't some childish fantasy. Mrs. Taylor's calm demeanor turned to concern, and she immediately ushered Emily inside. With shaking hands, Emily showed her the bottle of pills, explaining everything she had seen, how Lisa had been acting differently, how Peter's condition had worsened, and how the pills didn't belong to any of his prescribed medications. Mrs. Taylor listened carefully, her concern deepening with each word. "We need to call the police," Mrs. Taylor said, her voice steady now but full of urgency. "You did the right thing, Emily. We'll get your uncle the help he needs." As Mrs. Taylor dialed the number for the police, Emily felt a flicker of hope. She had finally found someone who believed her, someone who could help stop Lisa before it was too late. The weight of the situation didn't fully lift from her shoulders, but she knew that, with the evidence in hand, they would finally get the truth. The dangerous woman who had been poisoning her uncle would not get away with it. It was just the beginning of the battle, but for the first time in weeks, Emily felt like she had some control over the terrifying situation that had taken over her life. The police arrived at the Thompsons' house shortly after Mrs. Taylor made the call. Emily watched from the window, her heart racing as officers stepped out of their cars and walked up to the front door with purposeful strides. Mrs. Taylor had stayed by her side, holding her hand, trying to offer reassurance that things would be okay. But Emily couldn't shake the fear that Lisa might somehow escape, that the truth might be hidden away like all the secrets she'd been keeping for months. What if the officers didn't believe them? What if Lisa managed to talk her way out of it, as she always seemed to do? Inside the house, Peter lay in his bed, too weak to move, too sick to fight. He didn't know what was happening or what was about to unfold. Emily knew that Lisa would be back soon. She always came home at the same time in the evening. The clock on the wall ticked louder with each passing second, and the sound felt like a drum beat echoing the urgency of the situation. Emily didn't know how much time they had before Lisa returned and realized what had happened. The officers knocked firmly on the door, and when Lisa answered, her expression shifted in an instant. Emily could see the way her aunt's eyes darted to the police officers, then quickly flickered to her, an unsettling mixture of surprise and something darker lurking beneath her otherwise calm exterior. She was good at hiding her emotions, but Emily could see through the cracks. Lisa was panicked, and in that moment Emily knew she'd made the right choice by coming forward. The officers introduced themselves and explained they had received a tip. Lisa's smile faded slightly as they mentioned the pills Emily had found. The officers asked her to step aside, and without hesitating they entered the house. Lisa's hands trembled slightly as she led them to the kitchen, where the medicine was stored. But the police were already one step ahead. They had Emily's statement and the evidence Mrs. Taylor had provided. They were aware of the poisoning, and Lisa knew that she couldn't talk her way out of this. As the officers searched through the house, Lisa's anxiety became more visible. Emily could see it in the way her aunt kept glancing at the door, as if she was planning to bolt at any moment. Lisa tried to act casual, but Emily could sense the panic rising in her. Her perfectly composed facade was beginning to crack. For a moment, Emily even thought she saw a flicker of fear in her aunt's eyes, but it disappeared just as quickly as it had appeared. Lisa was trying to hold herself together, but it was clear that the weight of what was happening was starting to sink in. When the officers found the pills, they confirmed Emily's worst fears. The substances in the bottle were not just any painkillers. They were a dangerous cocktail of drugs that could cause organ failure and death if consumed over time. It was clear now that Lisa had been poisoning Peter for weeks, slowly feeding him the drugs in his meals, hoping to weaken him to the point of no return. It wasn't a quick death she was aiming for, but a slow, torturous one, something that would look like natural causes. The evidence was damning. Lisa's calm exterior finally shattered when the officers began questioning her. She insisted that she had no idea what they were talking about, but her nervous behavior told a different story. She denied everything, but the officers were thorough, pulling out more pieces of evidence from the house that suggested foul play. Phone records, bank statements, and witness testimonies all pointed to her plan. It was clear that Lisa had been manipulating Peter, isolating him from his brother James, and slowly poisoning him to gain control of his finances. Her motive was greed, plain and simple. Emily watched as Lisa's demeanor shifted from denial to anger. She started to yell, claiming that this was all a misunderstanding, that they had it all wrong, but the officers weren't buying it. They had seen enough, and with the evidence mounting against her, it wasn't long before they placed her under arrest. The moment the handcuffs clicked around Lisa's wrists, Emily felt a strange sense of relief. The woman who had caused so much pain and fear in their lives was finally being held accountable. But even as she watched her aunt being led away by the police, Emily couldn't fully comprehend the weight of what had just happened. It was like a nightmare that she had been trapped in for so long. And now, finally, it was over. But the emotional toll on Peter, her family, and even herself would linger long after the police left. As the officers escorted Lisa out of the house, Emily felt a mix of emotions: relief, fear, and a sense of loss. She had done the right thing by coming forward, but she couldn't shake the thought that things would never be the same again. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold and empty, as if the darkness that had taken root there had been exposed to the light. Peter was eventually rushed to the hospital, where doctors worked to stabilize him. The poison had already caused significant damage, but thanks to Emily's quick thinking, he was expected to recover. The family that had once been torn apart by deceit and fear was finally beginning to heal. Emily, a young girl who had been forced to grow up too soon, had saved her uncle's life and brought the truth to light. It wasn't just the arrest of a wicked woman, it was the reclamation of her family, her home, and her future. The aftermath of Lisa's arrest was a whirlwind of emotions and changes for the Thompson family. Emily, though relieved that her uncle was safe, was also haunted by the images of her aunt's arrest. She had never imagined that the woman who had once been a second mother to her could be capable of such horrific actions. But as the weeks passed and the reality of the situation set in, Emily understood that it wasn't her fault. She had done what was necessary, even though it had cost her the innocence of her childhood. Peter's recovery was slow, but steady. The poison had taken its toll on his body, leaving him weak and disoriented for some time. But with the support of his family and the medical care he received, he slowly regained strength. The doctors were amazed that he had survived the prolonged poisoning, and they reassured Emily that Peter would make a full recovery. It was a bittersweet victory. While her uncle was alive, the family was still reeling from the emotional and psychological damage caused by Lisa's betrayal. James, who had been away on business during the most critical moments, returned to find his brother in the hospital and his wife in police custody. The shock of it all was almost too much for him to bear. He couldn't understand how Lisa had been capable of such a monstrous act. It became clear to him that his wife had been hiding her true nature for years, using manipulation and deceit to keep him and everyone else in the dark. But the revelation didn't make the betrayal any less painful. It was one thing to be deceived, but to realize that the person you loved was capable of murder was a truth too cruel to fully digest. As the police investigation into Lisa's actions unfolded, it was discovered that her motives ran deeper than anyone had initially realized. Lisa had not only been poisoning Peter for months, but had also been siphoning money from his bank accounts, using his illness as a cover for her financial exploitation. She had been planning to inherit his fortune once he was dead, a plan she had been executing with cold precision. The evidence stacked against her was overwhelming, and soon she was charged with attempted murder, fraud, and several other crimes. Throughout this time, Emily's relationship with her uncle grew stronger. Peter, though still recovering, was more present in her life than he had been in months. He would sit with her for hours, telling her stories of his adventures, and they would laugh together, just as they had when he first moved in. Emily's heart swelled with affection for him, and she was proud of how strong he was becoming. He had faced the darkest moments of his life and come out on the other side. Emily admired his resilience and vowed to protect him no matter what. But the real change in the Thompson household wasn't just in Peter's recovery. It was in the way Emily began to see herself. She had always been a quiet and obedient little girl, doing as she was told and staying out of trouble. But the events of the past few months had forced her to find strength she never knew she had. She had stood up when it mattered most, saved her uncle's life, and brought the truth to light. Emily had become a quiet hero in her own right, though she didn't see it that way. To her, it was simply the right thing to do. As the months went by, the family began to heal. Peter returned to his job, though it was a long road back to full health. James, too, worked through the pain of his wife's betrayal, though the process of forgiveness was a difficult one. Lisa's arrest and the ensuing scandal had torn apart the foundation of their family, but there was hope. With Emily's strength, they had managed to survive the darkest chapter of their lives. Eventually, the trial came, and Lisa was convicted of her crimes. She was sentenced to prison for a long time, but for Emily, the punishment felt secondary. It was the justice for her uncle that mattered most, and the fact that Lisa could never hurt anyone again gave her a sense of peace she had longed for. In the end, the Thompson family was forever changed. They would never be the same, but they had come through the storm stronger than before. Emily, the young girl who had saved her uncle, had become a symbol of resilience and courage. She had faced the darkness head-on, and in doing so, she had shown everyone that even the smallest among us can make a world of difference. For Emily, the real victory wasn't in the conviction or the punishment. It was in the simple, quiet truth that she had done what was right, no matter the cost.